Hi everyone, it's Athena here from Courage Coaching. Now, in advance, I'd like to apologize for any noise in the background. My puppy is here and she's running around playing and she's watching birds from the window, and she generally wants to play at the moment, but I've already done that for 2 hours and she's still got lots of energy. So any noise you hear in the background, it's basically Dowla. So the video I wanted to do today is basically very similar to my video Rules Children Follow in a Narcissistic Home. I wanted to do another video on this because I've had a lot of people leave comments on this asking for help, a lot of people leaving comments saying how validated they feel and how much they understand more about why they may live with anxiety or depression now, that they don't blame themselves anymore because they realize that actually it was their parents who had dysfunctional behaviors, who were abusive, emotionally abusive, physically abusive. And I also wanted to say that these rules, they don't only apply to children, they could apply to adult children. Now, firstly, I wanted to say that in a narcissistically abusive home, it is usually most of these rules that apply. In some homes, it may be just one or two, and that obviously will not do as much damage as having all of these rules. Now, to make this video, also the previous video I did on these rules, I did a lot of research. I've read a lot of books. I'm also a psychological coach myself. I'm a CBC coach, which means that I have trained in cognitive behavioral coaching. So I also have a background in psychology. I also have a huge interest in it. And having said that, my background is also unfortunately one of having grown up in a dysfunctional home. So I'm very, very aware of how these rules affected me in my own personal life. I want to help others because when I was a kid, I didn't have that help. I didn't have that support. God, I didn't even have internet. I was only starting to use internet a little bit. So for those of you who are 16, 17, or even younger, you are very lucky that you live in a time where there is internet because you have so many resources, you have so many things you can turn to. There's online support groups, Facebook groups. There's a lot out there. You can write blogs about your experiences, and then other people that also share the same experiences as you can interact with you, and that in itself is very healing. So one of the questions that I got a lot from my video Rules Children Follow in a Narcissistic Home is, now that I know that my parents are dysfunctional, what do I do? How do I heal from this? How do I, move forward? And if you cannot afford therapy, if you aren't able to leave home yet because you're not maybe financially able to, or you haven't finished school, the two things that I think are very valuable are blogging. I would say set up an online blog and talk about your feelings. Use it as a diary. Go on there and write about how you feel at home, things that may have happened with your parents. There is a huge community of people online who are there to support you because they have also been through something similar. Actually, all the comments that are being left on my video of people talking about their experiences, I see that there's a lot of support going back and forth. A lot of people will write something about their experiences, which is a very painful experience, and then people are going to reply. People are going to support or say something supportive. So that in itself is very healing. The second thing I would do is I would join a support group for survivors of narcissistic abuse, or for people who have a narcissistic mother or a narcissistic father. There are so many groups online. If you don't want to go on groups on Facebook, then if you look up narcissistic support group online, you will find many other ones which you can join that are on a separate website. Because the problem is with Facebook, for instance, if you join certain pages or you like certain pages, then maybe you may have family on there that you don't want them to see that you have joined this group. Now, these two things are very valuable. Don't underestimate how helpful they can be. I'm also somebody who is able to offer coaching in narcissistic abuse. Obviously, I have a lot of experience myself, but I also know what has helped me. I also have seen it in certain people that I've coached that have certain goals of going no contact or setting boundaries with their narcissistic parent. So if you need any help with that at all, please let me know. Send me an email. There are links on the front page of my YouTube channel or on the banner of my YouTube page. There's also links there. I also have a Facebook page. I also have a website blog. So any of those things can help you if you need any additional support. In this video, I want to go into this whole rules children follow in a little bit more detail. I want to summarize some of them so they're a little bit more easy to remember. I'm also going to include a PDF, which you will find on my website. If you would like this PDF, then feel free to visit my website, www.couragecoaching.wordpress.com. There's a small fee attached to this. It's just $1. However, it will have everything that I've talked about in this video clearly written down, so you can keep hold of this, and you can maybe take it with you to a therapist if you've decided to start therapy, or it can help you generally feel better about yourself. So when you're having a really low moment, you can look at this PDF and you can remind yourself that it's not your fault that you are suffering, that it's not your fault that you feel that you aren't able to do things as well as you'd like. Being in a narcissistic home with parents like that is basically like you have been programmed from a young age to feel a certain way, to act a certain way, and none of it is healthy. So be kind to yourself. It's very important to be kind to yourself and to talk to yourself in a positive way, because most of what comes out of a narcissist's mouth, unfortunately, is really negative. So, in a dysfunctional family home, children, or adult children for that matter, live in a very different reality to those children who are lucky enough to have healthy parents. Although they may think that their parents' behavior might be normal, it isn't. So first of all, children will feel lonely, they will feel anxiety, they will feel depression, they will have low self-worth, they will also feel like they have a sense of emptiness. And unfortunately, that stems from the fact that the narcissistic parents aren't able to unconditionally love their children, because they still have certain unmet needs from their own childhood. And something that's worth mentioning is that narcissism can be generational. For instance, if your parents had parents that were also narcissistic, then it is very important to be aware of the fact that your parents might have not been able to break that pattern. They might have been so wounded, they might have had so much trauma in their own childhoods that and led them to become narcissistic, and they didn't seek out therapy and they didn't think that there was anything wrong. So of course they will have carried that then into looking after you, and they may think they are a good parent, but actually they are not. Now, at the worst end of the spectrum, the abuse inflicted on children can be a combination of emotional, physical, and sexual. It really depends. But in my opinion, emotional, mental abuse is what stays with the victim the most. So the child then grows up, and as an adult child, they are a survivor of this abuse, but it is the constant programming, the constant things that their parents may have said over and over again, that is very, very difficult to unlearn. It takes years and years of recovery to change. Physical and sexual abuse are horrific. I would not wish that on anybody, and if you are somebody who is experiencing this, then I'm really, really sorry. The emotional abuse that goes with that, however, is the most harmful. That is what causes a personality disorder. So a lot of children that have had parents with personality disorders end up developing personality disorders themselves. So it could be schizoid, it could be avoidant personality, it could be borderline personality, and also narcissistic personality, unfortunately. It's important to mention that as a child's brain is still developing, if the abuse that they've experienced at home is prolonged, then of course this causes trauma, and it leads to something known as complex post-traumatic stress. And the main difference between complex post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress is that the person with complex post-traumatic stress suffers with what is known as emotional flashbacks. Now, emotional flashbacks come up when somebody may be criticized at work by a colleague. It might have just been something as simple as, couldn't you have done this better? And that will trigger a flashback to when the adult was a child and their parents scolded them for doing something. Emotional flashbacks are very serious and they're very difficult to manage because they pop up out of nowhere, and they are easily triggered by things such as tone of voice, by a simple critical comment. They are something that I could talk about in another video. I also have got a video on complex PTSD, so check it out if you haven't already. So I will start with the rules. The first one is be blind. For instance, if you see dad hitting mum when he was drunk, then pretend you didn't see it. So that's what being blind means. If you see abuse happening, if you see things that are traumatic happening, if you see things that are wrong in a narcissistic home, parents do not want you to go out and tell anybody. They want to make sure that nobody knows what is going on, because of course if you say something, then social services will get involved and all hell will break loose. The second rule is be quiet. Again, if you feel really upset and you want to express, anger, or you want to express to your parent how upset you are by what they did or what they said to you, the parent will not want you to go and talk to anybody about what was said in the family home. The third rule is be numb. Don't feel your feelings. That is one of the most destructive things that a child can experience at home. For a child to not be allowed to feel their feelings, the same goes for an adult child. Like I said, this continues. It doesn't change. If you're 20 and you're still living at home, then this is still going to continue. And also if you're not living at home and you're still enmeshed in a relationship with your parents, because don't forget it's a dysfunctional relationship, and dysfunctional relationships are not as easy to kind of get away from, because the parent who is toxic has found ways to guilt trip their child into keeping in contact with them. So be numb, don't feel your feelings. If you're upset or angry, just get over it. That is the third rule. The fourth rule is be careful. A narcissistic parent doesn't want you to make mistakes. If you have an accident, then you'll be punished. If you hurt yourself, then you will be punished. If you accidentally break something, then you will be punished. So you have to be careful all the time. You have to be hyper-vigilant all the time. This rule, be careful, also is very close to being perfect. So a narcissistic parent a lot of the time expects their child to be perfect, because of course what their child does reflects on them. Now, this whole thing that I mentioned in the last video, which is avoid reality to make things look respectable or change reality, this involves gaslighting. So like I said in the last video, if a child witnesses something unacceptable, then the parent will make sure that the child understands that what they saw wasn't really how they thought it was. So if somebody falls down the stairs because they were drunk, then actually they'll say, no, that didn't really happen. The parent will do everything they can to make certain bad things that you've witnessed seem more socially acceptable, or they would twist the truth so the child doesn't talk to anybody. Now, another thing that narcissistic parents tell their children or adult children is to avoid relationships. They have a way of making the child feel as if they cannot trust anybody. They want to instill fear into their children, so they don't have a lot of close friendships, so they don't have a huge social circle, because if they do that, then it is easier for them to control their child and to get their child to do more of what they want. Another rule is they say don't cry. So again, this goes with don't feel, don't cry. Then we have don't trust. Narcissistic parents don't feel that they can trust other people very well themselves, so they also instill that fear into their children, and they don't want them to trust anybody else other than them. Another thing, unfortunately, is that they expect their children to be serious and act like an adult. So a narcissistic parent will confide in their child emotionally, so they will expect the child to emotionally support them. They will expect the child to be a surrogate wife or a surrogate husband, or maybe even a psychologist, so they'll dump all their problems on them. They'll confide in the child about their marital problems or their sexual problems with their husband or wife. I mean, that is very inappropriate stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of boundary crossing, there's a lot of inappropriateness. One thing that's very destructive in a narcissistically abusive home is that the parents constantly guilt trip the children. So guilt tripping is very, very destructive. Guilt tripping and shaming the child or the adult child is something that stays with them, unfortunately, for the rest of their life. Shaking this guilt off is very, very difficult. I must admit, this is something that I still struggle with. Although I'm not in contact with my father, I still have this guilt that kind of pops up, this feeling of guilt that pops up from time to time, and I won't be able to switch off my mind, and it will just eat away at me. But unfortunately, yeah, this guilt becomes so ingrained, and it's very, very destructive. Always be hyper-vigilant is another rule. Again, if there is constant chaos and drama within a family home, the child learns to constantly be tense. Oh God, dad's angry. I better be careful. Oh dear, mom's crying again. I better not say anything that might upset her. So this is the hypervigilance I'm talking about. This is, you know, you're constantly in this state of kind of tension. And narcissists love chaos. They love drama. Another thing, narcissistic parents always expect their children to obey them. You better do as I say, otherwise you will be punished. Don't have boundaries. That is also very, very common, very destructive. Narcissistic parents think that they have a right to invade their child's boundaries all the time. When the child maybe reaches a certain age and they're a teenager, they still think that it's okay to go into their room without knocking, to go through their things, to read their diaries. If their child wants to be alone so they can have a shower, the parents think, oh, I'll still go into the bathroom, I don't care. If I see her naked, you know, I'm still her parent. I have every right to see her naked. There's obviously a time where certain boundaries are put in place, and there has to be a certain level of respect. Something also that some parents say, not all, but some, is if there is this whole golden child in the family or scapegoat, some parents will say, why can't you be more like your brother and sister? Why are you always such a failure? Being compared to somebody who's better than you all the time is not very good for your self-worth. So that's also something that narcissistic parents do. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is cognitive dissonance, or sending the child or giving the child mixed messages. Cognitive dissonance means, you know, the parent will say that they love the child, that will be very caring and loving towards the child sometimes, and then other times they will be extremely abusive, extremely punishing. They will hurt the child physically, sexually. They will undermine the child. They will tell their child, stop being stupid. Cognitive dissonance is also very, very destructive because the child, or the adult child for that matter, doesn't know how to feel. I apologize for all the entertaining background noise. My puppy is only 6 months old, so she is full of energy all the time, and even though I'm always taking her out for walks and stuff, she's constantly running around playing, squeaking her toys, playing fetch, rumbling around, growling, whatever. She's a puppy, so yeah. Anyway, this video was a very important one. I am really, really happy that so many of you found my previous videos so validating, so helpful. I apologize again for not clarifying certain things a little bit better. YouTube and making videos is not a talent I have, it's just something that I am doing because I want to reach out to more people, and so far it's worked. So for me, that is all that matters. Narcissism, unfortunately, is an epidemic. It is everywhere. It is in every culture. It's actually also something that unfortunately is noticed more in certain cultures rather than in others. So for instance, I'm half Greek, half Scottish. In Greece, a lot of families have narcissistic tendencies, and it's ingrained in the culture as well, which of course doesn't make it healthier. I hope you found the video helpful. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I always try and reply. I may not be able to reply to all comments. There are a lot at a time sometimes, and it's just hard for me to get around to answering to every comment, but I do acknowledge every single one of them, and thank you so much. I've also got a Patreon page, so please check it out if you haven't already. The more support I get on there, the easier it will be for me to make more videos. I don't have the time, unfortunately, to do that in between coaching, blogging, making videos, and all the other work that I do. So yeah, that's it. I wish you a really nice day wherever you are, and see you very soon, I hope. Take care. Bye.